It's 2023. The Everett Lee Show is back. To kick off 2023 is my guest, Derek Sharp, owner and creator of Curtain Jerker Designs. Part 1 interview, and it's happening right now.
The Everett Lee Show podcast, a shot of entertainment.
Derek Sharp, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
How's it going, man? First of all, thank you for having me on. It's going to be a fun time. I definitely put this on my list for 2023, and we're just trying to make it happen, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that we're all starting to, for like 2023, everyone doing something new for the year. And I see a lot of people follow through the whole year what they do at 2023 or the new year, actually. And some people make it, with the goals they set. And some people fall short and stuff. But the one thing I see every year, Derek, on TV is advertisements for people to get back in the gym all the time.
I've also seen that. And I actually kind of went the opposite direction. I'm a normal gym goer, so I've actually stayed away from the gym this time of the year. I'm gonna let the first month people they kind of wing themselves out. I mean, I tried to go the first of the year and it was a madhouse, and I was just, you know what, I'm just gonna back off. I can see who's here in a couple of months still, but I like to think of starting a new goal, not waiting until the end of the year. There's nothing that says you can't wait till tomorrow. Or Monday, start of the new week, if you have a goal like that. But usually the people that are like New Year's, I'm going to go to the gym, are the ones that usually don't pan out and don't stick with it. Going to the gym is a commitment, just like anything else we do. This podcast is a commitment. Me working and making sure that I get everyone their stuff they need is a commitment. So yeah, New Year's.
Yeah, it is. It is. And with New Year and stuff, it's exciting to see what the new year is going to bring. I believe the beginning of 2020, the year I don't really talk too much about. I go back and look at old podcast, the beginning of 2020, and then how it just went into that whole year. By the end of that year, I was like, thank God this year is over. Because I started all off, yeah, man, going to be, chipper about it. Yeah, 2020. Yeah, this is going to be a great year. By the time the end, December 2020 rolled around, it's like, thank God this year is over. But
yeah, I had a little bit of that, but at the same time, I honestly needed a break. At that point, I was 8 years in officially. So at that point, I was just like, I'm just going to unplug. I took the time to settle down and not have to worry about so many projects coming in and stuff like that. And as much as, I love my clients and I love helping out people, I was starting to get to that point where it's burned out. I was that close. A couple more months and I would have just been like, I'm just done. So that it kind of gave me a reset. Once that initial shock of everything shutting down, that all of my clients went through, events getting canceled, wrestling shows getting canceled, and then, that big deal about like, let's give it a couple of weeks. We'll be able to reschedule these things and stuff like that. And then, months later. So I used it as a reset. I probably wouldn't be as happy and as chipper as I am these days if it wasn't for the reset. Honestly, I was getting to a point where burnout was a real thing. So yeah, that time we don't really talk about. It was a lot of self-reflection, and I'm glad to see that you've continued with this and then kept things going despite all that. I know a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of promotions shut down after the pandemic. They didn't come back from it, which really separates, the people that are serious about things, yourself with the show. I know a couple other people that we worked with kind of fell off and are not doing their podcast anymore. So I got to commend you for sticking with it. But yeah, we don't talk about those times, the dark times, as I like to refer to it as.
yeah, the dark times. I got busy. I almost got burnt out because I was working a job and I got furloughed for 73 days. And I got furloughed on April 8th, 2020. And I didn't go back to work until July, or actually June 23rd of 2020. So it was about 2 months. So at that time, it was 2 months of staying up late, drinking a lot, doing other substances that I'm not going to mention, and just having a good time, and just doing this. And I was trying to make something, trying to make more out of it. But then once I got back into a regular work schedule, and then getting involved with another wrestling promotion at the end of 2020, which set me up for 2021. It was good. It was some good times. But you said at that time you've been doing this for 8 years, and I know you do graphic design.
I do.
For wrestling, and I want to start off just asking about, like, growing up a fan of wrestling. What do you remember as a kid watching wrestling? What drew you to it?
Well, despite the way I look, I am a little bit older. So my first wrestling show was at age 3, which would be 1978.
Wow.
Mom was a wrestling fan. Dad wasn't quite the fan. So for the first couple of years, we didn't do anything. When my mom divorced my dad when I was 3, she moved back to San Antonio, Texas. Wrestling was a big thing, big part of her life there. So we started attending shows at 3, Southwest Championship Wrestling, and then WCCW would come in. So my early memories are of, the Von Erichs, the Freebirds, a young Mick Foley. Cactus Jack was there at the time.
Nice.
So always growing up around wrestling. There were several times throughout the years growing up where different lawsuits and things happened with my mom and my brothers. And at one time we were going to start a promotion. So my mom was backstage at the Royal Rumble in 94 in Houston. So she was in the process of getting things going. But back then it was very hard to get into wrestling. It was very gated. It was very hush hush secretive. So going through high school, I stuck to sports. There wasn't a situation where nowadays you can join wrestling school. To even get close to ring was a big deal back then. So I kind of went towards sports, but always a fan. Graduated in 94, the NWO, the DX thing, all that was going on. I kept it in the background, but at the same time, I started going to college and growing up a little and doing more adult things. But yeah, always been a wrestling fan. Always went to shows throughout the years. The house was divided. My brother was a big WCW fan, so he thought the NWO was the greatest thing in the world, and I was on the DX army. So we bickered back and forth a lot.
Oh, wow. Divided, man. NWO versus DX. Oh, wow.
It was some crazy times, man. Like it was also crazy times just being a fan back then. Things were as hot as ever. And I don't want to seem like that old guy that is like, wrestling back in my day was so much better, but it was in a different aspect. It was to today's fans and today's more modern stuff, but I can enjoy both times. When the network was a thing and everyone started with WWE Network, I went back and watched a lot of the classic stuff. Right now I'm going through the ECW stuff again. It's kind of muted and the music's changed and it's a lot of edits, but
yeah,
it's still good to look back on some of the older stuff.
Mm-hmm. It is. I remember, I graduated high school in 98, and that was really around the height of the Attitude Era, because I remember growing up as a kid watching WWF, WCW. My dad was a big Dusty Rhodes fan. He hated Ric Flair. He couldn't stand Ric Flair. And me and my older brother, we'd bicker my dad. We'd get him all riled up and stuff. It's like almost every time Ric Flair show up on the TV, my dad throw TV out the door. Neighbors be like, "Oh, Ric Flair must have been on TV again." There goes TV. And it just watching that growing up, watching WWF and WCW, and then when later on there, as my senior year, rediscovering wrestling, because I didn't watch wrestling for quite a bit, and then after I graduated high school, I started watching WWF and WCW, going back and forth during the Monday Night Wars, great times, and then my dad, some of my memories watching wrestling with him when he was older was during the Ruthless Aggression era. That was fun there, because after WCW went, got bought out, and pretty much that's all there was. Me and my dad would watch that, and he still enjoyed it though, but he still talked about, wrestling's not like it was back in my day. And I was like, this is good stuff. He had some favorites and stuff though, but I mean, he didn't like Ric Flair back then, but when he got older, he liked Flair because of, the position they put him in and stuff. Especially when they put him as a GM for Raw. That was great.
Those were definitely good times. And, like I said, it just in my age, growing up, it wasn't a thing where nowadays you can, get through high school and then join a wrestling school. So it kind of not really ditched that, but I jumped into sports. Like I said, during high school, I played basketball. I attempted to to go somewhere with that, but we didn't get anywhere. And started just life outside of wrestling, and it was very weird the way things worked out. So originally from San Antonio, Texas. Now I'm here in BFE, Indiana, and a secret disclosed location that nobody wants to be at anyway. So I wouldn't even tell you. But I'm outside of Chicago. I'm in Indiana.
Good place for wrestling right now.
It is actually not a bad place for wrestling right now. And so I met a girl. That's how the story usually goes. And she lived up here, and I tracked over from San Antonio. Didn't have a lot going on. Came up here, fell into with a group of guys that actually trained in San Antonio at Shawn Michaels' Wrestling Academy. So it's kind of weird. It took me leaving down there to meet guys that had just come back. So it kind of just worked out. But met those guys, and then when my brother passed away at 32, I kind of had this thing going on where I'm like, am I doing something that's for me, is it this what I want to do with the rest of my life kind of situation? And being the wrestling fan, I was like, you know what? These guys are like, hey, we're going to start this wrestling school. Do you want to join? I'm like, why not? So I started wrestling training. They kicked the living shit out of me because it's wrestling training. That's kind of how it goes. But after a month, they, said, hey, what's the backstory? There's a reason why you're doing this. And I explained it to them. My brother and me are wrestling fans. Like, I wanted to give this a shot. And they were like, hey, first of all, you're 5'6" and 140. You're not you're not in any shape to be a wrestler. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But they're like, hey, we need a referee. Well, shit, it's still wrestling. You're still a part of the show. Yeah, sure. So I started becoming a referee and went to training for that. Much easier. No drop kicks, no leapfrogs, none of that stuff. It's basically that's where I got to in the training.
But you still had to learn how to take. You still had the bump too when you needed to.
I learned how to bump. I got to that part when we started doing leapfrogs and drop kicks. That was it. I drop kicked the guy in his kneecap one time. So I was like, yeah, I'll take the ref spots. But like I said, training and doing that kind of thing was more than enough. That was it. That was it. The first day in the ring, that was it. I mean, at the end of the day, I was crying because this is not predetermined or as fake as people want to think. If you have that notion, please find a school near you and go give it a shot. And I'm telling you, after a day, you'll be like, yeah, no, there's some physicality to it. But after that first day, I was like, that's it. Like, I went from you don't even get anywhere close to ring when I was a kid to the part where I'm in the ring. Like, that was it. I could have quit. That would have been my story. You wouldn't have been interviewing me, but still, that would have been more than enough of the story. And it just spitballed from there. Like, the local guys started running these shows, and they were like, "You're the ref," and I'm like, "Okay." So for that part of my career, being in the ring with guys that you watch on TV, because that's where it got to that point where we'd start bringing in these, these legends or these older wrestlers, and I'd be like, and I just, I'm pinching myself. I'm like, look, like I got to be in the ring with Marty Jannetty and Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Greg the Hammer Valentine, and I'm just like, this is it. I'm living the dream, so to speak. But um, it's just crazy how that a little door opened up, and I kind of jumped in, and then luckily I fell in with a group of guys that like to travel.
Hmm.
So we didn't just stay in Indiana. We went to Texas and Carolinas and all over the place, and just being in the back of a car with a bunch of guys driving, getting into trouble, and going for little to no pay and
Right.
stuff like that. It's just that was just part of the craziness that happened, and I could have happily been done with the story after that.
Yeah.
Uh, but
How
go ahead.
I was going to ask you, you said going back to Texas. Now, how was that coming from Texas and then going back to Texas and being able, refing, shows?
Well,
How was
one, I didn't realize how hot Texas was until I left and came back. I
that?
was like, Jesus, it's hot in this place. Woo. But no, that was, a whole full circle moment. Like, having friends from school see me and being like, you talked about wrestling in high school and middle school. And like, that was the thing where you were like this big wrestling person. But,
Yeah.
like I said, at the time, like that wasn't anywhere you could go with that. But yeah, that was an eye-opening experience. Like I said, I could have been done after the reffing thing, but, um, pro wrestling, as I'm sure you know, is very much like indie rock bands, and they do, everything's DIY, and it's friends of our friends, this guy, and pieces that get put together for this puzzle that fans normally don't see. Fans usually show up, they see the presentation, they enjoy their time, but looking at the parts that it takes to find a building and insurances and booking talent and all that stuff. Um, so as all that's happening and I'm refing, we start putting on these local shows, and I decide to be a team player and teach myself enough graphics, enough Photoshop to save the company $60 that we were paying for at the time, which basically was a sheet of paper with some text on it, little black and white squared photos, and just horrible stuff. But I mean, this is 2005, so
Mhm.
I taught myself Photoshop, and as I was refing and working these companies, I'd be like, "Hey, do you need somebody? Do you need some help with the flyer? Do you need this and that?" So I eventually worked it to where I was refing, but I was doing the flyers for most of the companies I was working for. So it helped out. The envelope was a little fatter at the end of the night. It's still all with the gas and food, but uh, I had weaseled my way in there and made myself a bigger asset to the company. Uh, Now it's if you fire me, you don't lose a ref, you lose a ref. You use the flyer guy. Um, I was even doing websites, HTML. I was coding websites.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah,
HTML? I
old school.
got into
Yeah.
I got into doing that at one point. I tried to get into that because I thought it was neat because um, I liked the thing about HTML code. I was like reading up on some of the stuff at the time because I figured I would just do it just to try to learn it and it's fascinating to me that coding because it all like it makes sense. It's like one like for I'm just throwing this out there,
Yeah.
which it's not related, but it's almost like one would be yes, zero would be no, and just knowing where to put everything.
Yeah, and then
And
brackets to close it. If you leave it open, then it screws up your whole thing and all that good stuff. But so we were one of the first companies to actually have a website, not just on MySpace, because there were a lot of companies at the time that had MySpace. But yeah, I know I'm
I
dating this.
remember those days.
Yes, and then
Wow.
we also we had a uh, weekly, nightly, daily show whenever we felt like doing it. Podcast. It was on Blog Talk Radio, so that was
Oh yeah,
really it's really
Blog Talk Radio. Yeah.
yeah. So I made myself an asset in all these different ways, so that I couldn't get fired. I had a little bit of job security, even though it was at the time indie wrestling was a lot worse than it is now. But
Yeah, you pretty much had a lot of hats on.
I
You
did.
put a lot of hats. That was great because it would make sense. It's like, all right, we're gonna get rid of him, but then we don't have all this other stuff. This goes with him,
Which
which
they tried to do one time. They tried to fire me. We had a really bad show and a falling out, and I was like, okay, well, I'm done. And they were like, okay. And then that was Saturday. By Monday, they were like, how do we get in? What's the password for this website thing? And then Wednesday, they were like, well, how do we do the radio show? And I was like, oh, I'm like, I'm just gonna come back and do this. Like, uh, we patched things up for a couple more years, but it got to a point where it was bad again.
yeah,
But yeah, no, make yourself an asset. And that goes in anything you're doing. A company job, your own kind of deal. This for anybody who's out there listening. If you're starting up a new business, make yourself an asset. Um, and like I said, that reffing thing, it got to a point where those guys got to a point where we broke up again, finally, forever. Um, we had a show and it was at a bar. So selling tickets to kids, knowing the kids are going to get removed at 10 o'clock, and the show went on at 9, and leaving me to set everything up while the owner and co-owner go to the casino to gamble away the budget and everyone's payroll.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's were they trying to double they think they were going to double it and then
Yep.
come back and then
Yep.
I mean, what are you gonna tell the boys when you blew all the money on playing
Yes.
something that you don't win on?
And
How?
then as we go along in that show, by match number 2, the soldering on the corner post breaks.
Ooh,
So the ring's being held up by one of those bungee cords that goes around the car that's got that metal hook that you kind of
uh,
crank. So that's holding up the ring and
oh
everything.
no way. Oh shoot, why my
I forgot what it's called too, but one of those,
yeah,
they kind of rigged
strap.
it up.
Uh,
Yeah, that with that and a jack to hold the ring up, and you couldn't wrestle in that corner because it would obviously it's on the jack
oh
because
man, I had a show. CFWE. We had a show on our May show. If you go back on the CFWE YouTube channel and you watch the May show they did, Deception, no one used the ropes. It was basically the ropes when they were setting up the ring. The promoter's son was setting up, helping set up the ring. He was part of the ring crew.
Yeah.
All right. We got the ropes up. Let's test them. He's hitting the ropes. He hit that rope right on the concrete, back on the concrete. You thank God you learn how to bump because as soon as it snapped, he bumped on the concrete. It hurt him there, but it was like, wow. So they put the ropes back up and they're like, no one used the ropes. No one used the ropes through that whole match. The whole match, it was like, okay, high flyers couldn't do high flying. I mean, there was probably a couple people who used a middle rope as a springboard at one point. People got up on the turnbuckle, at one point, but no one ran the ropes. Then the whole match, I think the reason why that was one of the most watched things shows was because of the technical. People had to actually wrestle, So, wow,
So
strap.
the same show gets worse though. So
Oh man.
So the ring breaks, it's
Mm-hmm.
jacked up. the next match is after the 10 o'clock limit, so anyone that was 21 and under got kicked out.
Oh man.
Not only did they keep the ring going by strapping it all up because he didn't have the money to refund everybody, but then the kids get kicked out, and now they're wanting refunds because they're like, hey, like if we knew this, we wouldn't have brought our kids to the show.
Yeah.
So we deal with that. The kids are kind of like in the outside area of the bar because there's a patio and you could still see the show. So they kind of were okay with it, not really. But so then after the show, as we're loading up the truck and the van and got the ring and there's a wedding party that was around the corner. They got kicked out of another bar. They decided to come to the bar where we're at. The promoter gets into a fight with one of the guys coming in drunk from the wedding party. At the time, we had, I'm not sure if you remember this guy or not, Larry Sweeney. Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney was a manager at the time. He came out to help the promoter. He got his nose broken.
Wow.
The ambulance came, picked him up, took him to the hospital while he's there. It's turned into a big brouhaha, and I was like, "This is it. I'm done. I'm done with these guys." And after that show, I wiped my hands of the situation and started. And I decided that I was going to. I got to the point where, like I said, I'm making the money with the flyers and the graphics, and wasting it on the road. So I'm like, you know what? I could just keep myself home. I can keep all this money. And so I took myself off the road. I ended up reffing close to 900 matches.
Wow.
I traveled to 8 different states, so I had a nice little from 2004 to 2000, or 2006 to 2012. I had a nice little deal. I did more than I expected. I thought that was it, but I'm like, okay. I went on Facebook. I made a Facebook business page. I was like, I'm a company now. I got flyers. If you need me, here we go. And like I said, that this thing is ticking off. I'm one of the few people that this is my 9 to 5 job. Like, how cool is that? Like, I don't have a stuffy office. Now I work crazy hours. I'm not gonna in any way, shape, or form tell you I work these regular 9 to 5 hours. I have 3 companies in Australia that I work for.
Really?
So the time difference is a little crazy. So I'm up at 3 in the morning, and I work from 7 to 7.
Wow.
And I'm asleep by 8, usually. And no, it's been fun. Like, I am now working on the other side of things. Like, I did everything on the front. I did ring announcing, referee. I even had a match. Believe it or not, after I got through with training, my trainer was like, "Hey, you know enough to get through a match," and he just basically kicked my ass, and no offense, and it was just for him to say he's another person that he trained. So, but I've done everything, like I said, ring announcing, managing, everything there's to do in the front, and then the back end. Like I said, helped to book wrestlers. That last show, everyone thought I was paying because I was there in the beginning when they were at the casino still. They're like, as wrestlers were showing up, they're like, "You're in charge," because I was telling them what to do. And so at the end of the night, they came to me and they're like, "Where's my money?" And I'm like, "Oh, don't." Like, that's the other guy. That's the other guy over there that's about to get his lights knocked out by some drunk guy. But
I had almost like a similar thing. I got with this in it was around 2017. Yeah, it was around 20. Yeah, the beginning of 2017, right when my daughter was born. It was towards the end of 2016 into 2017. I got with this guy who was starting up a promotion, and I ended up being his backstage interviewer. It was hell. I ended up I was doing a little bit of audio video stuff, and he had a show on Blog Talk. He seen stuff I was doing with mine when I started out doing Everett Lee show, and he, I inspired him, but it was almost like he was almost trying to rip me off here and there and stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever, it is what it is. Hey, at least I inspired you to be better. The way I look at it. But the first wrestling show he had, it was a total nightmare. The promoter made a fake stage. He was told not to make a stage. He made a stage out of particle board, and it broke. A guy got hurt. He went out back, faked a heart attack.
Oh, geez.
He took off to the hospital. I was running sound, and people's coming up to me, "Hey, I need my money." I'm like, "I don't got your money." "Well, so and so over there said you're in charge." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in charge of sound." And come to find out, the promoter's son was left in charge, and he left. He dipped out and left, and told her. And he even texted me on the phone. I had my phone on silent. He texted me. He said, "Hey,
Good
you're
luck,
in
man."
charge." I'm like, "Bullshit. I'm not in charge, man." And everyone's coming up to me, and I'm like, "No, man, I'm not the person." But the guy, he went under. He went under. He became like a black eye down here in Florida for wrestling. And yeah, it was a bad situation. I'm sitting there running sound. People come up, "Do I get paid?" And I was like, "Yeah, go talk to this guy." So one of the vets that was a good friend, I was telling him what's going on. He's like, "Send him to me. I'll talk to him." And I did. I'm running sound. "Hey, am I going to get paid by you?" I'm like, "No, but go talk to that guy."
Yeah. And that was another thing back then. It was a very much of a situation where it's like you're gonna go and drive, 4 or 5 hours away, and you might not get paid. Like, honestly, there were some of the situations where we drove to Ohio, and we were super excited because it was gonna be our first Ohio booking, and we're like, "We'll get Ohio off the map." So we get there, and like 10 minutes before the show, like, there's not a line outside. There's like no one there, and I'm like, "Oh shit." I'm like, "This is not looking good." So the promoter comes up to me and he's like, "Hey guys," he's like, "I'll give you half right now, and you guys can leave. You won't have to." And we're all dressed and we're ready to go. And um, the sad part is Demolition Axe was on the show.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said, and that was also a thing where I started realizing, like, I wanted to do the graphics after the reffing thing ended, because like you meet all these friends and all these people, and it's not to say that they won't put on a killer match in front of nobody, but I'm telling you, you get a couple hundred people, you get 50 people behind somebody, they're gonna go out there and bust ass. Like,
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. And for Demolition Axe to be sitting there, a nice guy, like I got a photo with him, we talked. But like to have someone like that, and it was literally because the promoter didn't have a flyer and he didn't promote, and then he didn't actually at the time like go out and put the flyers around the town. Like, now you can get away with Facebook. Like, not gonna lie, a lot of people just do online marketing. It's fine. Like, it's the new thing. That's how people, like, I don't ever hardly see a flyer on a poster or on a pole out here, or at the store. But like that's where it started. Is like I was in many of shows where there's like 10 people, and 3 of them came with one of the wrestlers because that's his girlfriend and her friend or his brother. Like, so just to have a crowd and to help these companies draw money, have a place for the guys to perform. And like I said, there's more energy out there in the crowd, and you get in there and you get crazy and you kind of do some cool stuff, and like you really feed off the crowd. I mean, I'm sure you playing sound and going, "Well, geez, there's like 4 people here. Like, what's the point of of doing this?" Like, they can
Yeah.
just come out with no music.
Yeah. There was the show was supposed to start at, I think, 6 o'clock. By 15 till, there was a line outside.
Nice. That's
And
the way they should be.
he turned people away because nothing was ready. People left, and he lost a lot of money. This guy lost a lot of money, but I mean, yeah, it was a shit show. It was a shit show. But when I was doing the stuff at CFWE, that was so like being head of production
Yeah.
and recording the shows, setting up doing commentary, putting up a monitor, for commentary. I had dual monitor in the back with the sound guy. I count down the sound guy, kind of getting that into that there. And then, the ran a monitor in the back for the boys. So that they sat in the back around the monitor and they watched the show when, they just sat back there. They weren't peeking around, in the corner,
Yeah.
through the curtain and stuff. It was great. And I mean, it was a couple hours away, but I mean, I was getting paid like peanuts, doing it. But
Yeah.
I took away the experience of it, and it helped. And getting into doing like graphic design with I use GIMP. I use that. I found GIMP accidentally, sat down, watched tutorials on how to do stuff, and sat there, and I spent hours trying to figure out how to do it myself.
Yeah.
And I like the hardest part for me when I was asked to do flyers. I'm like, okay, so how do I do a flyer? Honestly, I looked at other people's flyers, kind of get an idea. I'm like, okay, so I tried to do something, you move something here, and it's like not working. You make this too big, too small, and it was a pain in the ass. And I'm like, I can't do flyers. I could do just like a poster with a design on it that's flashy. That's it. But like when you're putting people in, it's like you don't want to make this I don't want if I make this person bigger than this one, they're gonna be like, why is this person bigger than I'm like, I was like, I don't want to piss people off. But
And that goes along with what some of the difficulties I had in the beginning. I love all my clients. I'm shaking my head because some of them I really like. Some of them by now I've worked with them enough that I know the specifics of how they think, more or less. There's some that's just like, here's the info, do what you want, and then there's some like that micromanage. And like I said, I love them all. Some days though, like the guy's like, I want this guy here and this guy there and that person there. And it makes sense because like on his card, like these guys are going to face each other and that kind of, so put them next to each other kind of deal. Some of the lucha stuff I do has like 20 people. So that's always fun trying to cram all these people into one little space.
yeah,
I've actually had a client where I worked for where if a certain person wasn't on the flyer one month and the next month they just didn't show up. And I'm like, it's a flyer. Wow. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like people.
Yeah,
Really.
I was last year when I worked for Adrenaline Wrestling. I stepped back and doing for video editing because I also when I worked for CWE in 2021, I got into doing video editing, and you can see the progress through those nine events from January to September. You could see the evolution on like how each one, how I got better and better at it.
I'll have to
And
check that out. What's the YouTube channel for that?
CFWE.
Awesome. I'll
Yeah,
definitely.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. And
And if you guys are listening and you haven't checked it out, like let's get some feedback on that. I feel like if he thinks it's changed and he can notice, usually we're the last ones to notice.
yeah,
Yeah. So I definitely will check that out.
yeah, it's pretty much my resume with video editing. And I got into doing editing with when I was talking with like independent film directors, and they talk about the editing process I've had on my show. And then even last year I had a movie editor on and
Nice.
listen to her talking about stuff. I'm like, man, I'm almost up like the same alley as what you do, but I do it with wrestling shows. And I tried not to watch a lot of WWE or AEW because I didn't want it to be a carbon copy. So I went out. I have IWTV, and there's a lot of good promotions on IWTV, and I'm like, I checked out production wise, which promotion, independent, indie promotions that are catch my eye, and I found a lot on there, like Uncharted. I was like, I love how they do their stuff. Defy Wrestling in Seattle.
Yeah.
How they do their promotion. I don't know if you've heard of Defy Wrestling.
Yeah,
that right there, it's what they do is just amazing. So I took aspects of that and different other promotions I've seen on IWTV, and I use that as my inspiration. I watch it from a production's point of view on how they cut, and edit and stuff. Like if the action, close calls for close up, then we used a roam cam. Anything from far and stuff, I used the hard cam and go back and forth between them and stuff. I even got to the point with CFWE where I was actually running 3 cameras, 2 hard and 1 roam cam. And then at one show, we actually ran 4 cameras. Ooh. It was 2 hard cameras and 2 roaming cameras. So I had 2 roam cameras. I had one guy on one side of the ring, one guy on the other, and they were parallel to each other. And then if someone falls out of the ring, they both come around at the same time. And we had the hard cam on one side of the ring, and then I took another hard cam and put it shooting from the top of the entrance pointing outside. So it's like hard, and then 2 roam. And it was great. It was a challenge. I challenged myself that way, and it worked. To me, it's one of my favorite shows that I edit, and it was good learning that experience there, and then also getting into doing some graphic designs, getting a little bit like animation with like the opening, animation sequence and
like
stuff
the lower third and stuff like that, or
what's that?
Did you do like the lower thirds on the bottom of the guys' names? And
the lower thirds. I looked at the lower thirds, and I could see, you could go on YouTube and different places and get like the green screen effects of them and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's cool. But then I said to myself, I looked and I really looked how they did that. And I'm like, how about I just make my own? So I went on GIMP, came up with the design for it and everything. And I used that. I made my own, and I would take different graphic design animations, and I'd take them and smash them together and get something. And that's pretty much how my thought process was of doing stuff. So I created stuff from scratch, but I take stuff that's there and mash it together and create something new with it. And people are like, wow, I've never seen shows wrestling shows edited like this, especially because like, how do you edit wrestling shows? And I said, I watched a lot of Bruce Lee Kung Fu movies, which I did, how they, back and forth and edit. I'm like, I'm going to use the same concept for wrestling. And it worked, made it look different. People's eyes got on it. We're like, wow. But that prepared me for Adrenaline Wrestling when I got called to do that there. And I talked with the owners about, and they're like, we want you to, edit our shows and do your thing like you did with CFWE. I'm like, okay. So I threw a number out there, just a number, and they're like, done. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's do this. So from the August show, it was the August show I started, and I also threw in there. I was like, I was been wanting to go back and do commentary. I did commentary back for Knockout Wrestling back in early 2020, during the summer of 2020. I did commentary for like 4 or 8 episodes of Knockout TV, and I've been itching to do it again because I love doing heel commentary, doing the color commentary, because I pull from Roddy Piper and Bobby Heenan. That old school mentality for commentary, cheering the heels, it's like the guy's cheating, and the person with me is like, oh, can you believe that? It's like he grabbed his foot while he was coming off the rope. So like, nah, his foot slipped. I'm in denial. Yeah, his foot slipped. And it, going back and doing commentary for Adrenaline Wrestling and doing what I did like with CWE, it was great. It lasted 4 months, and that pretty much was it. Adrenaline is like done because some backstage drama happened backstage, and the booker started getting booked with a group he was running around with, and he just got tired of the BS with like a lot of the talent down here that he dealt with. It's like, I'm going to set you up in a storyline, so this is what's going to happen. You're going to go out here, you're going to do this, you're going to job for this person. Oh, I don't lose. I want a championship. No. It don't work like that. Too many people think they're WWE superstars. They get a couple matches underneath their belt and they think they're WWE superstar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is that?
I don't know, man. Like the one show that I ran, I booked and I ran it for these guys. They had us wrestle for them before over in Metropolis, the big Superman museums down there. We went one time, worked a show for them, and then they they took it like a whole like 6 weeks or 7 weeks, and they were like, "We're doing another one." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Um, and then they had things booker, they had a booker, and then all of a sudden they call me 2 weeks before the show and they go, "Our booker left us. He doesn't want to do this. Can you step in?" I was like, "Okay, cool, yeah, like that's not a big deal." I'm like, but we need to be more realistic with this payroll. I'm like, I've got to chop some heads off here. Um, and so I made some calls, and the one call that I got, I just crossed my fingers on this one because I guess it was when Rosie got released from WWE,
Mm-hmm.
and he was doing a show in the town over on Friday. And they talked these two guys in, and they were the sweetest guys. They're in the wrong business. First of all, I told them, but I'm like, yeah, I'll make the call. They that promoter from that company told them they had to use Rosie for Saturday because he was going to be in the area. And I was like, well, first of all, you don't want if he's that close that he's just right there, that people aren't going to pay to see him on Friday and then come pay to see him on Saturday. That's lesson one. Um, and then lesson two was the price he wanted was not anywhere near their budget. And I'm like, that would have put him way over. And I'm like, I know it's not my money, but I'm still going to try to make you off some bucks here. I'm like, I'm not going to, put you in the hole and be like, yeah, we had a good time and, take my money and leave. So I called, I was like, I got his number and I called and I got the voicemail and I was like, hey man, like, I'm sorry. Like the booker's out and we just don't have the money for you. And I never heard back from him again. Thank God. Cause I don't want to deal with any Samoans coming to kick my ass or whatever the deal is going to be on that one.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
so we ran that show there and, at a wrestler, and he's a friend of mine, and we started around the same time. Get up with me, and he's like, "Hey, man!" Like he had done a Friday night deal with Ring of Honor, and he's like, "Hey, Ring of Honor wants to use me on Saturday," and he was like, "But your show Saturday, what do I do?" And I'm like, "Do you want friend Derek or do you want Booker Derek?" And he's like, well, friend Derek. A friend Derek goes, "Congratulations, that's awesome that you made an impression for them, so much so on doing an extra deal on Friday that they want to use you for Saturday." I'm like, "Congrats, man, that's really good." And he's like, "What about Booker Derek?" I was like, "You better not no show me on Saturday night. You better be there." And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "I can respect that." He's like, "I'll be there." But no, you've got to leave the friend. I always tell people like, if I'm in that situation backstage where I'm in a little bit of power and in charge of things, like friend Derek disappears the minute I walk in the door, like, and that's where a lot of people I think have their issues. Kind of have to be a hard ass, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you said like people telling them that they don't want to do a certain thing. I The way I look at it is this is a movie
Yeah.
and you're playing parts in my movie. Now, this is the part I have for you. And trust me, in the long run, it's going to pay off. But
Right.
you're not seeing that. Yeah, you're not seeing that point. Yeah, if you're losing this month and you're losing next month, maybe it's going to build something that you get this fluke victory over someone, and then you're going to be really happy because you'll be like, "Oh, that was great." So, like
Yeah.
I said, I look at things as movies. Like when you're talking about, looking at more of how movies are shot and using cutscenes from Bruce Lee movies and bringing that different aspect into things. When
Mm-hmm.
I first started with the refing thing, I was big on production. I was like, if we have an awesome entrance way, I'm like, if we have lights and smoke, and you can cover up a lot of bad wrestling with
Yeah.
smoke in theirs and a nice lighting fixture and an ambiance. We had a event in a small dingy little hole in the wall. Like uh it was a small time boxing place where they had boxing. It was like on the third story of a building, and we had Steve Carino come in, and he was fresh off of ECW closing down, and because that building was so small, the 300 or 400 people we had in there felt like 1,000. And because of that ambiance of the smaller building, like we had, I had the best we could on production, and that vibe felt, and it came across on film, um, like there was a lot of people because it was so loud and ruckus and closing it together, and it didn't if you panned around the crowd, because we're all crammed in there, you didn't see any empty gaps in seating or anything like that. So forever, I'm always talking about production value. And good angles. If you can get people to the point where they just want to see two guys kill each other, despite if they're going to go put on a classic 60-minute Iron Man greatest match ever, 12 stars or whatever. If it's just and that's the thing, we're like, that ECW and Paul Heyman did a good job. Like, he knew what his guys were, and he knew how they worked, and he knew what kind of situations to put him in. Some of that stuff with Tommy Dreamer and Raven, you just wanted to see Tommy Dreamer finally get his hands on them.
Yeah.
So storylines and angles is a big thing. Not so the production, when you start talking about film production and stuff like that, it doesn't surprise me that your cuts are different and people see that kind of thing. Reverse engineering is kind of what I did with the flyers too. When I started, there was a couple of different people that I'm like, those are cool flyers, and I, even to this day, I have a folder of ideas, old movie posters. The companies I work for in Chicago, Freelance and Freelance Underground, I believe
Yes.
I believe they might be on IWTV.
Yes. My favorite, I just got to add, Derek, that one of my favorite promotions out of there, man. They've put on hell of a great shows, man. I love the shows they put on.
They really do put on some good stuff. Not to get too far off track, but actually, a couple of years back before the pandemic, I made a rare appearance, and I went to one of the shows. And when I got there, the owner is just being pulled 20 different directions, and I kind of like, hey man, like get to me when you can. And it just seemed like he's running around and running around, and he's got this look on his face. And I was like, and I stopped him. I'm like, hey man, like what's going on? Like, are you okay? And he was like, no. He's like, I don't have a ringside camera, a roaming camera. He's like, my guy's not here. And I was like, I will try to help. I'm like, I've never done this before. And he's like, well, we're gonna be live on iPay-per-view. I'm like, well, fuck. Like, I give me the camera, like go down there. And so I've done everything. Like, I even did a live commentary on the stream one time. It was horrible. Just me by myself. I was trying to Joey Styles the best I could, man. It really was. I'm like, I don't have no one to play off of. This is
Yeah.
kind of hard,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, no, the freelance guys, I love that stuff. They're I give them all the credit in the world to why I'm even close to where I'm at with success on this whole deal. Originally, these were guys that I refed for on some shows around here, and they remembered, and they were like, "Hey, we're starting this thing. I know you do flyers." And like for the first 7 or 8 years, I was doing other stuff. Then we took a break, and I'm back to doing both the freelance and the freelance underground stuff. And like, that's such a hot promotion in Chicago. Like,
Yeah.
it
Yes.
to get booked on those shows, like it's really also a process because there's so many guys throwing their hats at them, going, "Hey, like, can we get booked?" So it's not just show up with your friend, kind of, "Hey, like I'm an extra guy, can I get on that show?" Like those things are booked and planned out way
Yeah.
in advance. And talk about production, like when you go backstage to watch that in action, it's just so much to a next level on things. Um, but yeah, man, like it's like the way I got into all this is like I said, I stopped reffing, had fun with that, and then it's now working on the other end of things, like doing stuff for people. Um, I don't have all the videos up on my YouTube channel, but I do have some of them. I from time to time get celebrity or client plugs from people I've worked with.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah,
Nice.
so I've got a lot that I'm trying to actually re-upload or upload for the first time. But getting to work with these guys is just a pinch because like one, these are guys I saw on TV, and then two, actually get to work with them and get in the video with that. And a couple of these were me asking, and a couple of them were surprise videos that my clients will send me and be like, "Hey, man, like." It's one thing that we hear like, "Hey, Rob Van Dam really liked your flyer," but then for Rob Van Dam to send you a video and be like, "Hey, man, like I dig what you did," really opens up your eyes there to get a little
Mhm.
bit of justification that you are actually doing something. So it's really hard to keep it humble and know it's not about you, but at the same time, I feel like it's like the chicken and the egg. Are the fans there because the flyer's awesome? If the flyer wasn't awesome, would the fans be there? So
Yeah.
you have to kind of do that thing, and it's like because you go to events, we all see things, even if it's like a concert or a con or any of these things. Like
Mhm.
you see a flyer and you're like, that looks badass. That looks like something I want to go to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's promoting, man. And the story you're talking about earlier with the Ohio,
Yeah,
promoting. You got to get it out there and promote it and stuff. And you got to promote it. Yes, so a lot of wrestling on social media.
yeah,
You go on a promotions Facebook page. They got the flyer up. It's shared like all over the place, and also you got the promos. That's another thing, doing the promos for the social media to promote the show. Like I like it when I see a interesting promo,
yeah.
because if it catches me, it's like I like to see that. You see a promo for the show, it's like be there January 8th, or I'm gonna kick your ass, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'll see you in the ring. It's like, something like that, to me, I'm like, oh dude, I like to see the get his ass kicked. It draws you in, and then you see the flyer, you're like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that draws you in, and the card and knowing who's going to be there, everything that all plays a factor into that. And it's neat how all these parts, just puzzles, just come together, just to put on a show to entertain people, to take people out of their reality for a couple hours, have them cheering, booing, getting into it and stuff, and seeing these great workers, blood, sweat, and tears, put on the best show possible, like it's their last show. And long-term booking, storytelling, it's at its best.
And it's also for any promoters that might be listening, like it is giving the fans a lot of trusting the fans a lot, man, because you're putting up all this money, for the building, for the talent, to sometimes it's flights and travel expenses for some of the bigger name talents, um, on the basis that your fan base is going to show up.
Mm.
Like, it's a financial responsibility, and I don't think, like I said, once we started seeing the backstage stuff and what goes into, all that risk, um, I think, sometimes the promoters don't get their just dues. Just sometimes, neither do the flyer guys. Like I said, I think I'm probably the only one that does this as a regular job.
Yeah.
And I can't knock anyone's hustle. Like, I got really fortunate in the beginning, the first couple of years. And today, um, my significant others have been super supportive. And the first 2 years, I did nothing for any money. Like, I did so much work for free. Um, and I think now it's paying off because I set that base. I set the standard of it's going to be good. I'm reliable. And, and like I said, it's not an extra job. I know a couple other people that, they'll work their 9 to 5 and come home and be like, hey, like I got this project to do and whatnot. And right now I've got 15 monthly clients.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. You got clients that is great that you're doing work for. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here with part one of this interview with Derek Sharp, owner and creator of Curtain Jerker Designs. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening to this podcast on the platform that you choose to watch the Everett Lee Show or listen to the Everett Lee Show. And we'll return next week with part two and the conclusion of this interview. Everyone have a great week and a good day, and we'll see you again next week. Peace.
Follow The Everett Lee Show on the following social media platforms: Facebook, The Everett Lee Show; Twitter, @The Everett _Lee; Instagram, Everett Lee. Subscribe, follow, The Everett Lee Show, on the following platforms: Anchor.fm/Everett Lee Show, YouTube, Everett Lee, and Johners Podcast Network, WrestlingWithJohners.com.